All right, guys. Good morning. I'm going to try to make this short today. Just want to leave you with a few encouraging words. Yesterday we talked and kind of pivoted, and we're going to stay in that same vein. We pivoted from suffering and what that meant for the Christian and how the Christian was to deal with suffering in light of our reality, in light of our truth that is now spoken over us in the gospel, in what Jesus Christ has done for us. And we talked about identity in the sense of what it is that every spiritual blessing in Christ means for us. So, for example, we talked about, every spiritual blessing in Christ, meaning that everything has been deposited into our account. We do not need any longer to want for anything that has not already been given to us. Everything that we need is in our account. God the Father has deposited every spiritual blessing. We lack nothing. That should be assuring to us. It should help us rest at ease. Today I want to talk about the reality of what makes that so certain. The reality of what makes that so certain is that in verse 4 we see here, "For he chose us in him before the creation of the world to be holy and blameless in his sight, in love." Now, if you notice that verse, if you understand what he's saying, it's very controversial. It's one of those things that has given people fits over the centuries, ever since Paul wrote this 2,000 years ago. Because what he's saying is not easily understood and ingested for all people. For he chose us in him. Who is he? The first he is God the Father. For God the Father chose us, all those who would be saved, the elect, those who are true born-again believers. He chose us in Christ, that's in him, before the foundation of the world, to be holy and blameless in his sight. Now let's break that down real quick. He says that God the Father in eternity past, before time present ever began, and before eternity future ever will be, that God the Father chose us, those who believe in Christ, to be saved, holy, and blameless, which means God's plan all along was that we as believers would be conformed to the image of Jesus Christ, that the fall would happen, Adam and Eve would sin in the garden. It doesn't mean God is culpable. It doesn't mean God caused it. It doesn't mean that God delighted in the fall of Adam and Eve. What rather it means is that God saw it as good in the sense that his ultimate glory would be shown, his ultimate glory and beauty and worthiness, his splendor, his glory, his love, his mercy, his grace. All of those things and more would be shown in the gospel and demonstrate his character in a way that simple non-creation or a creation without a fall never could. So God in eternity past decided that the best course of action was to save some individuals. That means that those individuals who are saved, if you are among that group and you are redeemed today, then consider yourself a person I'm talking to. But according to the gospel and according to Ephesians 1:4 here, God has decided that for his own glory and for his own purposes, that he would save some people so that they would be redeemed, and so that they will be chosen in Christ before the beginning of the world. That means salvation and the plan of salvation, the effect of salvation, the end goal of salvation had nothing at all to do with the individual's will. If you're saved today, it's because God has made the plan to save you from the beginning of the world. You should rest easy in that. It shouldn't make you feel uncomfortable. If you truly are saved, you should realize that what God has done is made a way for you before you ever sinned. What God has done is that he made a way for all those who would believe before there was ever a problem to make a way for. That God's plan was that he was thinking about a creation that did not at that time exist. In other words, God was thinking about redeeming you, that his plan was to redeem you before you ever needed saving. Now, there are many tertiary and even secondary issues that spawn from this topic, but suffice it to say on the Devo today, that when we say that God chose us, all those who believe, the true believers, not the false believers, the true believers and all those who ever will be saved. By the way, it also means all those who were saved before Christ by faith, that he made a way and a provision for them by the cross as a final atonement for their transgressions and sins, and that God has made a way possible, God, not you, that God has made a way possible for all the transgressions, sins, and the wickedness of all those who ever would believe to be reckoned to Christ, so that what happened to him would be reckoned on your behalf. So that it's as if your punishment has been absolved, because it has. Your punishment, your wickedness was imputed unto him, and his righteousness, his perfection, his glory and holiness was imputed to you on your behalf and all those who have ever believed in time present, that day about 2,000 years ago that we celebrated past, 3-4 days ago now with Good Friday. So, holy and blameless. Notice he says holy and blameless in his sight, which means, and this is not a fake righteousness. This is not a fake holiness, a fake blamelessness. This is the real righteousness of Jesus Christ on the behalf of the sinner. So when he says that he reckoned, that he sees you in his sight, what he's saying is he chose to see you as perfect and holy. Not just Adam's unblemished record of lack of disobedience, but this is the perfect record of Christ's obedience reckoned to you before the world ever began. Romans 8 speaks to this, and I won't flip there just for the sake of time, but Romans 8 speaks to, for those God foreordained, for those God predestined, he called, and those he called, he justified, and those he justified, he also glorified. Which means that the process of God in election and salvation, regeneration, justification, sanctification, glorification, all those occasions that we talk about in theology, that process throughout human history and even before human history, right here in verse 4, in eternity past, before the foundation of the world or the creation of the world, that God had planned and ordained to see you through it. This is eternal security. This is perseverance of the saints. And this is what we normally call in the pew, once saved, always saved. So when we're looking at verse 4, I want you to not look at the controversial part. Dig into election. Dig into sovereign foreordination on behalf of the saints if you would like. I encourage you to. But don't fixate on that to be a stumbling block for you in this passage. The point of this passage is that in love, verse 4, God foreordained, he predestined, he reckoned the righteousness of Christ, not just at the point of your salvation, but he planned for it from eternity past before you were ever made, so that every spiritual blessing in verse 3 could be yours in Jesus Christ. And that everything you need, you would be lacking nothing. It is God's electing grace. It is God's electing merit and favor that has given you the ability to have everything you need to walk like Christ, to obey Christ, to be in him, and to not lose your salvation. This is all God's wonderful plan. If God has got you to it, he'll see you through it. This has never been more true than in verse 4. God has ordained your salvation, and he's done so from the beginning. So God bless you guys. I hope this has spoke to your heart. I hope it's encouraged you. Stay in the Word. See you guys tomorrow.